and welcome to episode 42 of Book Writing Tips, quick tips for new and seasoned authors, and I am your host, Alba Arango. In today's episode, I'm going to go over different ways you can use to make your characters sound unique. Because one of the worst critiques you can get, and trust me, because I have gotten it too, is that, your characters all kind of sound the same. Like if you didn't put a character tag, I wouldn't even know who's talking. And that's like the worst because agents and publishers, as well as your readers, they want to see unique characters that stand out, not just from other books, but from other characters in your same book. So let's get down to it. How can you make your characters sound unique? Alrighty then, today's episode will be in two parts as always. In part one, I'm just going to go over some kind of general tips about pretty much something you can do that kind of goes around all of your characters. And then in part two, I'm going to get into a bunch, and I have literally a bunch of really specific things you can give to like one of your characters or maybe a couple of your characters to make them stand out from everyone else. So let's get right down to it. Part one, what are some general ways to make your characters sound unique? Well, I think one of the first things that people myself included, tend to do when they are writing a new book is to give one or maybe more than one of your characters some kind of a dialect. So it could be that if they're like a second language person, or if they're from the South, or if they're from New York, and you're giving them these sort of general dialect characteristics, that is a great way to make your characters sound unique. However, I will tell you from personal experience, as well as from hearing this from agents and publishers at various writers' conferences, too much dialect can really bog down the reading. So if your character is second language and she's always using the word chica, but she uses it a lot, it can be too much. Or if your character says dude, but he says it like every sentence, again, it's too much. And after a while, if you're using things like gonna and instead of them, like, apostrophe em instead of them, if you use it too often, it bothers the reader, and agents and publishers are going to pick up on that very, very quickly. So yes to using dialect, because that is a great way to show individuality. Just be careful you're not overdoing the dialect with your character. Another thing, slang. Now, slang is good and it can be bad. So it's good because it does kind of modernize your book, but it can also be bad if it's too slangy. Like if it's super hot, like right now, that means when your book gets published in like 2 years, it may not be really hot right then, and then it dates your book. Then you also have the problem that, okay, you want your book to be, forever. You want kids, or if you're writing for kids, if you're writing for adults, you want 20 years down the road that people are still going to want to pick up this book and read it. But you're talking about if you're using really, really modern slang, 20 years from now, the teenagers and the 20-somethings 20 years from now, those are words like their parents use. They don't want to see a protagonist using those words. Those are like beyond old school. Those are like old people words. So just be careful with the slang. And that goes across all your characters and all your books, that if you're using too modern of slang, like if you use the word cool, it's been around for like 50 years or so, you can probably get away with it. But if you're using words that teenagers use today, again, might be too dated for when the book finally gets published, or even like 10 years down the road, again, way too dated. So just kind of keep that in mind. One last general thing before I get into the really good stuff, the real specific stuff that you might want to really stick around for. Last general thing is grammar. Okay, so using grammar that is considered proper grammar is something, especially if you're writing for kids, that agents and publishers and teachers, all the gatekeepers definitely want to see. And even if your kids, if you're looking at, but I want them to sound, realistic. Yes and no, you do want them to sound realistic, but you also want to teach. Right? You're writing for kids. You want to be able to teach them the grammar that people want them to use. So that might be something to keep in mind if you want your books to get through the gatekeepers. Now, if you're writing for adults, obviously it's not as big of a deal. However, I will tell you, a lot of readers don't like to see a lot of poor grammar in their books. Now, you might have one character that uses poor grammar all the time. And as long as it's not terrible, you'll get away with it. But I can tell you, I was in a writer's group one time, and there was one of the authors who that's their character, always just bad grammar. And he was like, and a lot of people told him like that's a nuisance. Like I don't like to read it. And he's like, but that's the character. And I get both sides, because yes, it is the character and you want to be true to your character. But at the same time, if your goal is to have readers and you have several readers telling you they just don't like it, they don't want to keep reading, then that's something to keep in mind as well. So you'll have to make the decision, how true to your character do you want to be? Maybe just sometimes, maybe spread it out, spread the bad grammar out so that the reader remembers that they speak like that, but maybe have them not use it so consistently that it becomes an annoyance. Okay, now, before I get to part 2 and like this list of that you may want to have a pen and pencil ready for, this list of specific things you can do to make your character sound unique, it's time for the crazy law / writing prompt. And if you're new to the show, every week I give you a law, and it is a crazy law, something that was a real law in history, but probably isn't a law anymore. And your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to write a short story based on that law. And this is kind of just a way to flex those writing muscles, maybe give you a break from your work in progress. All right, here we go. This week's crazy law / writing prompt. In South Carolina, a law prohibits hip pockets because they furnish a convenient place for pint bottles. Oh, you can have fun with that one. Come on now. All right, let's get back to our topic here, though. What are some specific ways you can make your characters sound unique? All right, here we go. First one I want to talk about is you can make one of your characters a pessimist or an optimist. Or even better, make one a pessimist, and one an optimist. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of you know pessimistic people. And they tend to be pessimistic about everything. They kind of see the bad side of everything. Like you're trying to plan a vacation, your character's trying to plan a vacation, and the one's like, hey, how about we go to Florida and we can go in like June? Like, oh, no, it's too hot and humid in June. I'm not going in the June. Okay. Let's go in like October. October? Are you crazy? That's like hurricane season. Okay, well then let's go in March. Oh, no, that's spring break. It's going to be super crowded. Everything you say kind of has this sort of negative connotation to it. And you all know people like that. And that is a great character trait to write for one of your characters. And that will make them unique because they're always seeing the downside of things. They're like the Eeyore of the group. Now, there's always the flip side too. You could make a character optimistic, like always, like the rose-colored glasses. Like everything they see, the silver lining all the time. And for some people, that gets annoying. Oh my gosh, you always have to see the good side of everything. Well, yeah, I mean, that's a great character trait. So that's one thing you could do, make a pessimist or an optimist out of one of your characters. Here's another thing. You could have one of your characters use professional buzzwords in just their regular everyday talking. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, there are certain buzzwords that are affiliated with certain professions, and people use it all the time in their profession and don't realize it. And then they come home and they're talking to their spouse or their girlfriend that's not in that profession, and they're still kind of throwing out these buzzwords. So here's a couple of examples. Coffee badging. That's a pretty popular term in the office world. I, of course, not being an office person, would have no idea what that means. But office people, they would say that to each other, know exactly what that means. And that's something that your character may just kind of throw out there when they're hanging out with friends at a bar or something. And, that would be unique to them because no one else there works in an office. So no one else would get it. Or the only other person that gets it and laughs is the other person who works in an office. But that is kind of a way to give your character some unique kind of dialogue that other characters wouldn't have. Or something like differentiation. Okay, the only people I have ever heard use that word would be teachers. And yet I have heard teachers use it in the non-teaching world, and people just kind of look at them and they don't get it. Like, why don't they understand what I mean? Because, of course, that's a buzzword in the teaching profession, but not in other professions. So that's kind of a fun thing to do with your characters is if you know what profession they're in, if they're a veterinarian or a doctor, sometimes some of the buzzwords they use at work could be something they might slip out when they're in just everyday conversation. Okay, and speaking of conversation, my next one is actually talking about vocabulary. People who read a lot, who are well educated, often have a more broader vocabulary than those who don't, and will sometimes use words that maybe other people don't. I mean, they're big words that other people don't use. And that is a great character trait too. If you have a character, especially if they're kind of nerdy and they use a lot of these kind of larger buzzwords, they don't even have to be larger buzzwords. They could be common buzzwords. Things like maybe, instead of using maybe, they always use the word perhaps. And that's one thing that's kind of cool that you can do that differentiates a character. Did you get it? Differentiate? Because yes, I used to be a teacher. One of the things that can make your characters different is that they use different words. Just be careful, right? If you have the character that always says the word perhaps instead of maybe, just make sure that they always do it, because that would be a character trait that they and only they do. And that is kind of a cool thing to have your characters do. All right, here is another one. Contractions. Well, most of us use contractions, but I can tell you, if you have a character that is English is their second language, they sometimes won't use contractions. And I will tell you, like my mom, she will say cannot instead of can't. And I say can't because I was born and raised here, but she is second language. And that's just the way she speaks, which is kind of a cool thing to do if you have a character where English is their second language, and kind of try to eliminate the contractions in their vocabulary, and that'll make them sound unique. Very cool. Okay, another one. I told you I was going to give you a giant list. Another one, metaphors. You all have that friend that has to compare things all the time. So it's like this, and they'll use a metaphor. Or you'll be talking, you'll be like, what? I don't understand. Okay, let me give you an example. And then they use another metaphor and then another metaphor. And they use them constantly to kind of make their points, which is kind of cool, and a character trait that's kind of a fun one that you can have one of your characters use. Another one. Quotes. You have the character that's always quoting. Movie quotes are super fun, always, because you can have a lot of fun doing research with that. But yeah, I have a character that's always using movie quotes. Or it could even be from a specific movie. Like maybe they're like a total Star Wars like guru, and they're always using Star Wars quotes that only another Star Wars guru would get. Not the big ones like May the Force be with you, but they're always using like really random ones, and you're like, what? And they're like, oh, yeah, didn't you see? And then they're talking, the Mandalorian, and anyone who is not a Star Wars kind of might get tired of them, but that's kind of a fun trait. All right, another one. The storyteller. And I know you all know this. They have a story about everything. Like, oh, I can't believe, I just got back from that. My friend, she's got laryngitis. Oh, well, I had laryngitis once, and there's the story. Or, oh, I know we were out and God, the stars were so clear. Oh, yeah. There was this time when I was at Yosemite, and there's the story. And that's kind of a fun trait. It can be annoying, but it is a kind of a fun trait to give someone because they will always have a story. And of course, the best things would be that the stories serve a point, or maybe the initial first few don't serve a point, but then there's that story that really gives your main character that aha moment. Like they get it now. They hear the story and it clicks. So those are great opportunities to use your other characters' traits for special moments down the road. All right. More. I told you, man, I have a bunch of them. More. Sentence length. So you have those characters that are long-winded and just keep going and going and going, kind of like me right now in this podcast. Ha, kidding. But you do have those characters that they are long-winded. Like it takes them forever to make a point. Like they're not the kind that's going to say, to make a long story short, and it's like too late. Yeah, that's that character. That's a good trait where they just go on and on and on, because then you have the other characters kind of look at each other and they kind of know, oh my God, it's going to be one of those stories. You have that. And that's a great opportunity for you to not just show character development of the character that's long-winded, but of your other characters and how they react to that. And then there's the opposite of that. You have the character who doesn't say much ever, who's just, kind of silent or short sentences. And so that when they do actually say something long, like everyone's like aghast and whatever they're saying must be important because, it's more than 5 words. There's those kind of characters too, which are also great. And for my last one, I know this list was lengthy. My last one is you can have a character who's just silent, who doesn't speak much. And that is also a very powerful trait, because then when they do speak, it's important, or it's something that everyone needs to hear or pay attention to or shock. And so these are, I know it's a long list, but these are a lot of ways that you can make your characters unique. You can give one character this trait, one character that trait, one character none of these traits, one character who's like, oh my gosh, with all these traits going on. This is how you can make all your characters unique and stand out, not just from other books, but from each other inside of your book. Well, I hope this has been helpful. If it does, please be sure to give this episode a like. Be sure to subscribe. I drop a new episode every Wednesday. So until next week, be safe. I wish you all a week full of peace and love, and I will see you all next week.